here we are in approximately 1956 on our way over to Minister's Island. You can see across in the distance the old canning factory.
So who took this films?
My father. My father was Bernard Hansen. My father died in '63, so I would have been about 6 or 7 years old at this time.
What was your connection with Minister's Island?
My mother was born over there. Her father was the head gardener and landscape architect for Sir William and Lady Van Horn.
And his name was?
Harry Clark, and his wife was Mary Clark. He was brought over from Kew Garden and worked firstly at Van Horn's mansion in Montreal. My grandmother worked a few buildings over on Sherbrooke and Mountain Street, and they met, got married, and came out here and had 9 children. So we were fortunate to be able to come up and spend the summers here. We were always thrilled to be able to go to the island. Of course, if the tide was up, I was even more thrilled because it would mean we'd be able to go over by boat and then come back and get the car afterwards. But we always stopped at the foot at the end of Bar Road, and we went in through the hedge at the old Maxwell mansion, and we'd have a drink of water. There was always a sterling silver cup there. It was like blessing us for our long voyage that we had arrived and to be welcomed with this beautiful cold spring water. Of course, at the time, there were still buildings that were still standing, that weren't knocked down. One of the buyers of Minister's Island, he didn't like the fact that the house up on the hill was bigger than his, so he had it knocked down, which was kind of sad because it was a beautiful home and you could see for miles around from the second floor. You could see how beautiful it was and how high up it was. And you always knew when visitors were going to come because as long as the tide was up, you were safe. And then as soon as the tide came down, you'd have visitors. And that was Frank Miller's house. He was the caretaker at the farm at the time. There's the dairy. To be able to drive up to the barn, the farm, with my uncle and pick up 6 quarts of milk with cream on the top, fresh from the cows, and vegetables fresh from the garden to the plate. There's the boarding house, which unfortunately got knocked down. Some other outbuildings that no longer exist. This is, of course, my grandmother's house.
That's the gardener's cottage?
Well, they call it the gardener's cottage, but it should be called the Clark house because they occupied it for almost 100 years and took care of the island. They weren't just gardeners, they were the same family. There's their dogs. Butch was a beautiful dog. The other one would just bite you. There's one of the greenhouses. Everything was well built. When you walked into the greenhouse, the smell of the earth and the plants, oh my God. That's me. The fruit trees that were in, they all had nets underneath them. So whatever fruit fell on the nets, that's what was pretty well served up. That's the root cellar. We used to slide down that. You'll see us in action. It's my mother hanging out the clothes. It's Mary Clark. On the main floor, you went into the bathroom. And at the end of the bathroom, there was a little hobbit door that went down the stairs into the greenhouse. Well, I guess the guy was working in the greenhouse and didn't want to go all the way around to the front of the cottage. He could just go up the stairs. When my grandfather died, suddenly of a heart attack, my grandmother was told that they would have to get off the island, like pretty well immediately, and with 9 children. And so fortunately, my uncle Bill Clark, the son, stepped up to the plate, and he took over as the manager of the island until 1972, when the province bought the island a little bit too late. But in any event, he was not only taking care of the gardens, he was taking care of the whole island. And what a character. He talked to everybody.
Who are those two?
My brother and I. Look at the hydrangeas, friend. They're always beautiful. They painted the rocks white. There was a lovely swing there where that chair is. There's the white rocks. And the gardens just filled everywhere.
No deer on the island like we have now.
No, there was wolves back then. There's my Aunt Kitty, my brother Damien, my Aunt Margaret, and my grandmother. Kitty Clark?
Yes.
Kathleen Clark, really. And that's Mary Clark, that's my mother, and that's me. Boy, do I look good with my little suit on. I used to stay that way till about 4 o'clock. Everything was strict. There was no elbows on the table. And on a Sunday, they'd stop in the store and we'd get a bottle of Pepsi-Cola. My God, what a thrill that was. But the food was always fresh. There was 2 sides to the house. Bill and his family lived on one side, my grandmother on the other.
House, and there was a garage at the back.
Yes, and then behind that there was a little cabin with a wood stove that I'd sneak in, light the fire, and cook an apple. And Rover. That's my mother. But it was self-sufficient. You had fruit, vegetables, anything you wanted, milk, cheese, everything fresh.
Henry said it was a 500-acre playground.
But the rows and rows of flowers and the smell, it was like landing in Hawaii. You just smelt the flowers everywhere.
Must have been amazing. Who were those ladies?
That is my grandmother, my mother, and my aunt, and my brother. And the people in that truck, they were from the farm. There's the tennis court. It's my grandmother and my Aunt Kitty and my mother.
Mother's on the left.
Yes.
Grandmother's in the middle.
That's my brother. But the whole island was alive. The animals and the plants and the flowers and the people working. It was wonderful. And it was a cottage, industry that really supported all of St. Andrews during the 40s and then during the war months. And everything was just so, and I mean, they didn't have all that much of equipment. And the workers originally, I think they were getting $7 a day. And they worked from morning till night and then got taken home by boat or by car across the bay. I would have given my right arm and 2 teeth to be one of them. Just to have that gorgeous life on the island and the peace and quiet, surrounded with the serenity. There's one of the workers from the island that worked at the farm. And there was a Dutch couple, there they are. And this is a Sunday, so they're coming around with their family.
On the right?
Yeah, they worked up at the farm. You can tell they ate well. I don't know his name.
So that was, you say there was a Dutch family visiting, or?
They were working on the farm.
Oh, yeah. In 56, this is.
Yeah. There's some of the chairs, all very heavy. Of course, there was the bath changing rooms downstairs. And then you went out and there was 2 pools you could swim in. Every time the tide would change, of course, the pool water would, and the sun would heat it up. So William was very solar passive, the way he had his greenhouses and hothouses. And
who are these 2 ladies?
that would be my mother and my Aunt Kitty again.
Yeah.
Lots of times people would want to have a tour, and one of my uncles, probably my Uncle John, would probably get a 25-cent tip or something for bringing people through. And there we are in the bay, and me and the buff. It was cold, but
I'm sure.
you can see the old lawnmowers. It was nothing big and fancy, and they kept the job perfect. There wasn't a weed in place.
I wonder how many staff they had. How many gardening staff?
6.
6? How many clerks?
I'm not counting the clerks in that 6. The workers that came here. But Bud and Henry, of course, and Jim were actively involved as growing up as workers. The colors and how everything was put in, just so not a weed. Well, as my grandmother said, she watched it go from alders back to alders, which was disastrous because it was a showpiece, and then she had to watch it go back down to pretty well nothing and then back up again. But there's a great group now, and they've been performing some great miracles, and we're lucky that we got the barns restored. And you can see that was a slate roof. And I told that to the province, and they, oh no, it wasn't slate. I said, oh yes it was. At the end there, further, they had all the sweet peas. You smelt that as soon as you walked close to it. I mean, it was the sense that you would pick up. You can't describe it. Everything was always just so. And that's Dutch pipe. You see the peonies growing, the sweet peas growing up on that one.
And then there's a huge high screen of some sort.
When the windmill was going and the sound of the motor downstairs, thump, 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 it was like the pulse of the island going on, and that's pretty well all you heard. And right at the end of the laneway here, you can see that triangle. There was always flowers there. And you could either go straight to the barn or go left. That's the dryer cottage. That was the chauffeur. There's the garage. There's the avenue. So when we had those trees, see that at the end there? See the flowers? That was a triangle where you could go straight up to the farm, or you went down towards the bar. And of course, when we came up, there was a different way of going than there is today. We were to the right, and it was a big arch. I think it had Copenhagen written in it, and then you'd drive up that way. And of course, back then they graded the bar, and they put gravel down. They haven't been doing that in years. We used to catch quite a few flounder. We are at the wharf, and that's the day when the wharf was filled with fishermen. There weren't any day adventures back then.
So this is 56.
You can see by the cars. I don't think we see 56. We might.
Yeah, those cars are what, 54 or 5.
3, 2.
3, 4, 5.
See, that's a 54 Chev there.
Yeah.
Looks like it might be a 55 next to it, but this is the Grand Manan Ferry coming in. And there's a Lucinda too. My uncle Cecil Clark used to motor young Lucinda Fleemer around in, I believe it was the Lucinda 1. You can see how they're taking their cars off the ferry there, boy. Whatever worked.
I wonder how many they dropped.
I think they got pretty good at it after a while.
I imagine.
Well, there was always people with money coming to St. Andrews. I had new cars. And I came from Montreal and I rented 2 suites in the hotel. And I had to sit my mother on the lawn and have a drink first before she'd even come into the hotel. Anyway, after she got in the suite, I couldn't pry her away from it. It was so nice, she said. There was more fishers back then. I remember walking along the shore one day and a fisher came by with his boat and handed me a big lobster and said, "Don't just tell me you found it on the beach and take it home." I brought it home and my grandmother cooked it up in a big pot of seawater. And they saw the plugs. It was Murchie that gave it to me. That's the one thing we can't tell everyone is to go and sniff the sea there and experience it for themselves, because a picture might be 1,000 words, but an experience is millions.